In 3, 2, 1. And we are live. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. Welcome to additional Facebook Live. My name is Levi, and today I have Mary with me. I met Mary during our meetings in San Diego, meetups about real estate, MTRs, and so forth. Mary is 24 years old, real estate investor living in San Diego. However, her investment property is in Oklahoma. Oh, I also have in Oklahoma. Interesting. Oklahoma City. In January of 2024, she bought a quad, which she self-manages. Wow, Mary, you brave. Three of the units are long-term, and one of the units is midterm. This strategy allows Mary to both increase cash flow and occupancy while minimizing turnover cost as well. As she holds this property long term, buy and hold, this is I liked as well. She is also getting ready to enter her next project, which will be flip that possible turns into burr out of state. In her day-to-day, Mary is hard money lender offering bridge and DSCR loans to investors nationwide. Mary, welcome. Thank you for
Yeah,
joining
thanks for
us.
having me and thanks for the intro.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right, let's start with tell us your story, please.
Yeah, definitely. So I first got introduced to real estate investing when I was 19. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and that kind of like led me down a whole rabbit hole of just that entire world. And so once I read that book, it led me to go through all these other like YouTube videos, podcasts, books I was reading. And then by the time I graduated college, I was like, okay, I think I really want to get my first property at this point. So I started going to real estate meetups in San Diego. And as you know, there's a good amount of them. So I was able to kind of form a accountability group and a group of friends that were also investors, and they kind of like helped to push me along for the like for next year or so after that. And I eventually purchased my first property when I was 23, and that was in Oklahoma. So yeah, I think it was just a matter of educating myself a lot for the first couple of years, and then once I found a group of people doing what I wanted to do, it made it seem a lot more possible for me to get my first property. And now I'm working on getting the second one soon.
Absolutely. For me, Rich Dad Poor Dad was the turning point. Also,
It's so good.
life, absolutely, and then change your mind, how you think about the money, and also Cash Flow Quadrant was
Yeah,
another book that I read.
I read that one too. It was
You
great.
read about that, yeah, and he took actions. I can see it for sure. Why Oklahoma?
Yeah, so I was at first I wanted to my first strategy was actually like to rent by the room in San Diego. But I quickly learned it takes a while to qualify for a loan in San Diego because everything's so expensive. So I decided to go out of state instead. And I was looking for markets because I wanted to buy something that was preferably a 3 or 4 unit. And I was out of state. So I was hoping to find something under like 400K that was still like small multifamily. So I started looking at markets that were below the national average for like sales price. And then from there, I found a podcast episode on BiggerPockets, and it was called 8 Unsexy Markets to Invest in. And Oklahoma City was one of those. And basically, in that video, they talked about different cities that had better than the national average for things like population growth, wage growth, median home price increasing, and things like that. So in general, it had a good macro economic factors and a good like housing market. And so that was kind of what made me choose Oklahoma out of like the cities in that list that were still under like where my price budget was at. And then I had gone to Oklahoma one time as well before. So I was like somewhat familiar with the cities, whereas the other cities I'd heard about, I never had been there. So it was a combination of those things, but it was able to like match exactly what I was looking for once I looked at specific properties. So yeah.
I understand. Yeah, when you research, when I'm researching the market, I'm looking population growth, job growth, um, couple more aspects of that.
Totally.
Yeah. Do you have any criteria what you were looking for? Why quad and not duplex or single family?
Yeah, so honestly, I had been kind of like telling myself I wanted to invest for a few years at that point, and I was talking to someone else who had bought a quad for their first property, and they were like, honestly, if you qualify for it and you know you have the education in place, like go out and get as much as you can. Then you're going to maximize your debt pay down. You're going to maximize the cash flow potentially, and you're going to get more experience because I think I have learned a lot more about managing it myself and putting in those systems, having 4 units to manage instead of one. So I think it helped me to learn faster and then, just increase my tax savings and those kinds of benefits more so because I have a bigger property now and more tenants to manage.
Absolutely. We'll talk about numbers in a couple more seconds. Just to reiterate, a lot of people don't know that up to 4 units it's considered to be residential property, which means you can get 30 years fixed mortgage. And then when I learn about that, I'm like, oh my God, we should buy up to 4 doors, right? And then each individual can qualify up to 10 mortgages. So if you buy every time a fourplex or quad, you're going to have 40 doors with 30 years
Right?
fixed. It's
No, it's
amazing.
crazy.
Yes.
Exactly. And I really want to take advantage of like that conventional rate with like, I mean, there's so many benefits that, only we have in like this country for some of that stuff. So it's,
Uh-huh.
take advantage when you can.
Absolutely. And did you take a DSCR loan on this property or did you do the conventional loan?
Yeah, so I went the conventional route. So I just was able to qualify for it with like my W-2 income. And yeah, it was just 30-year fixed rate, conventional, 20% down.
20% down. Okay. And it was as an investment property purchase or is it primary residence?
Investor property.
Okay. Do you mind to share some numbers with us, please?
Yeah, sure. So basically it was on the market for 415,000. I offered about like 390K and it had been on the market for 6 months. So I think the seller was pretty motivated to sell at that point. They hadn't gotten many offers at that point and they had gotten offers, but they weren't like satisfied yet. So I think that by the time I offered, they wanted to take something. And so it was nice because they were able to negotiate more. So I think they at first they took 390K and then I had the like appraisal done and there were a couple repairs needed. It was about like $6,000 in repairs or so. And so I was like, they could either do the repairs, but I wanted to just instead get cash for them so that way I could manage the repairs if they were needed. And there was nothing huge. It was just kind of like minor stuff that added up. So they gave me $3,000 extra and like seller credit for that too. So I was able to get it for about 387K compared to like the list price.
Understood. And before you gave the offer, did you do some analysis on the property, how it's going to cash flow? Where did you take the numbers for rent, for example? And did you have this mindset that you're going to do 3 property as a long term and 1 property and 1 unit as a short term or midterm?
Yeah, so I analyzed every property before I put in any offers, and I just used the BiggerPockets like rental property calculator. Yeah, so if you have the pro version, it's a really helpful tool. It will give you all the analysis, like if you put in enough numbers, so like the ROI, the cash on cash return, cash flow numbers. And so that was a really helpful tool for me for being able to figure out exactly what a property can look like in different scenarios. So I underwrote it. I underwrote every property I was looking at first for a long-term rental, to make sure that it would at least like break even with that kind of numbers, and then I would after that look and see, okay, is this something that could work well as an Airbnb or medium term? So I did analyze it for those things as well. I found with Oklahoma City, obviously it's not a super popular area for like tourists, so I didn't go the Airbnb route like short-term rental. But there are a good amount of like cities, or so not cities, hospitals, and also like a lot of people in the military in Oklahoma City. And so because of that, there are a good amount of people who are there for like midterm stays. And so when I was looking on Furnish Finder and doing some research on that kind of thing, I found that medium term was actually doing pretty well. So like for a unit that's renting out for like 950 long term, I'll get like 1600 for a medium term unit for the same size and everything. So that's why the reason I was like, okay, I'm gonna turn one of them into medium term, see how it goes. And it's been doing well, pretty like so far. I would say I might even turn a second unit into medium term as well when one of my long term tenants moves out. Right now they're on like year long leases, so nothing immediate, but I have been considering that just because it is a good difference between the long term and the medium term rental numbers.
Absolutely. And when you purchased the property, did you inherit the tenants or you had your own?
Yeah, so two of the units, the upstairs units, those were already occupied. So I inherited those tenants before I closed or anything. I got like estoppel agreements from them. I got like their lease agreements, how much they paid in like the deposit and all that. So I reviewed everything and made sure I was on board with what the lease terms were. And then as far as like the other two units, one that I turned into medium term was vacant, and then there was a third one that I filled with a long term tenant.
Got it. Speaking about BiggerPockets Pro version, I have one, and the calculator is amazing for sure. My one property that I purchased, I use the calculator, and the beauty is that it also gives you the projection. You can see what's
Yeah,
going to happen, right? So it
super
was very
helpful.
good, very helpful tool. I highly recommend. All right. So you bought it, you did renovation. Now, how did you source your tenants? How did you find them for the long term and for the midterm?
Yeah, so for the long term, I was actually kind of surprised. So first of all, I got like a cleaning done from a lady who cleans like Airbnbs, and then I had a photographer come and take professional photos of both of the units. So the one that was long term was obviously pretty easy. They came in, took photos. I got that one listed on Zillow, and then a couple other miscellaneous sites like apartments.com, Redfin. And so I was marketing on there for a while. And then I would say there was like some interest, but not as much as I was expecting. And then I decided to list it on Facebook Marketplace for long term. And that had way more interest. And
Interesting.
I told an investor that who I met in Oklahoma City. And he was saying, yeah, I actually only list properties for long term on Facebook. So I'm not sure why. But I learned in Oklahoma City, like the place to list long term markets, at least for my property, was in on Facebook much more. So I found a person on there. Basically, if they were interested, they would message me, and then I had like a preliminary, just very quick 5 questions to ask them, like their FICO, their income level, their desired move-in date, and there were like one or two other things. But once they sent me those answers to those questions and a picture of their ID, I just did self-guided tours. So basically, they could just like walk in themselves. I would give them a personalized like PIN code to unlock the front door in that unit, and they could let themselves in. They walk the unit, and then I had security cameras and everything. So it was very much like just self guided since I was out of state. And then, yeah, through Facebook, I found my long term tenant for that one property. And then obviously for the medium term, it's a little bit different. So I have marketed it on Airbnb and then Furnish Finder and also Verbo. And that one is I just had basically like the Airbnb listing. Everyone kind of has like their ID verified. They have like past hosts giving them reviews and things like that. So with that one, it was just someone inquired, and then basically as long as I can like verify that their identity has been checked by Airbnb, it's pretty easy for me to say, okay, yeah, you're able to check in at this date and all that stuff.
Okay, wow, so much to unpack here. Okay,
Yeah.
wow, absolutely amazing. So, when you did the screening for the tenant, or you asked those 5 questions, did you do any additional screening? Like maybe you used turbo tenants or something else?
Yeah, so once they like walked through the property and then they liked it, then I would come back to them and I would use a Rent Ready. That's like my property
Mm,
management software for long-term tenants. And through there, they have an application that goes through like previous employer information, their income level, previous landlord references, things like that. So I would have each adult that would be living there fill out an application, and then with that also comes like a FICO check, so like you're checking their credit score and
mhm.
their background. That way you can make sure there's no like criminal history or anything like that. And then I would call the previous employers, call the previous landlords. If they didn't have three landlords before then, I would call like their references of some sort. So even if that's like their parents, like if they've never been lived somewhere, like at least call someone to try and get some sort of idea if they're a reasonably like financial adult basically. And then I had a minimum FICO score of 650. So it was
Mhm.
kind of strict, but I wanted to be like on the more strict side just because I was definitely not wanting to deal with any like evictions or late payments. And I feel really lucky. I've never even had a tenant have a late fee. So everyone's very like, to the book with that stuff, which is nice. But yeah, it was pretty like thorough. It took me about like 2.5 months to find a tenant because I was kind of picky. But at this point, I don't regret it because she's been there since then, and she's a great tenant to have. So, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Um, it's better to take your time to find a good tenant ahead of time rather than spending money afterwards to get them out of the
Exactly.
property if they're not paying on time. I believe in this for sure. And I do exercise very the same process, right? I'm checking, I'm validating. One comment though, I usually call not the current landlord, but I also call the one before the current landlord because,
Yeah, yeah, that's
right,
very cool.
if the tenant is not so good, the current landlord will tell you, oh, probably, oh, he's very good, or she's very good, or they're very good, right? Yeah, go ahead, you get them. But if you call one prior, he or she will tell you the truth because they have no skin in the game anymore.
Yeah, no,
All
I
right.
definitely did that too. I feel like that was a good like, double
Yes.
checking process.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like from all the education that you have done, you implemented all those action items because they are talking about this in Bigger Pockets and other podcasts for sure. Okay. So I know how you market your property, how you screen your tenants. Can you please talk about how did you furnish the property being in San Diego?
Yeah, so that was definitely a bit of a process because I was kind of wondering. I decided so I actually never flew out to Oklahoma to see the property before I closed. It was after. So I was like, okay, I'm going to fly to Oklahoma, and during then I can kind of like do the furnishing process. But I did want to like mail furniture and like mail some of the stuff to furnish it ahead of time. And I was kind of torn on how to do that because I didn't want boxes just sitting out by the front
Mm,
door. And so I was talking to another friend of mine who is an investor, and she also furnished a property in like Georgia that was an Airbnb, and she said that basically, one of her tenants in the other unit was able to bring in all the boxes for her every day that came before she was there, and she just paid her like $30 or something to do that. And so I had texted one of the tenants that I had already talked to like over the phone, and I was like, would you be willing to just take in all the boxes that have my name on them for the next few days before I'm there, and I'll like take $35 off your rent for the month? And she was like, oh yeah, sure, like that sounds great. So I just did that. She brought in everything that was there before me, and then by the time I got there, there was like maybe half the stuff there, but I was there for 10 days. So then the other half came while I was there. And furnishing it was not as hard as it could have been because I was there alone, but I had a handyman from Thumbtack that I found, and
mm,
he was super easy. So I was kind of working full time while I was there because I have a remote job. And because of that, I had to have someone else kind of helping to assemble the furniture because I tried assembling like a nightstand and it took me like 2 hours. So I was like, I should just outsource that. And it saved me a lot of time. So the guy was there for probably like 2 different days, assembled almost everything that was like somewhat intricate. And then I, unwrapped everything, put all like the stuff in the kitchen, the bathrooms and everything. But yeah, I would say definitely helpful if you're alone to like have another person there helping you. It will save you a ton of time. And then that was pretty easy. I just got everything, almost everything, on Amazon, so it was all just shipped directly to my house. The hardest thing was like the window blinds. You have to be very exact. I learned about
mm,
like the measurements for like how big they should be for the window. So I kind of like estimated, not knowing that they had to be exact. And then a handyman came to like install them, and he was like, "These are not the right sizes. Will you return them?" And then he did the measurements, and he told me what to get. And I was like, "Thank you." So I would say that was definitely a thing to do at the beginning of the process. I like ran out of time, so by the time I left, it was like a day after that they arrived. So then the handyman came in and installed them. But yeah, you have to be exact about that. I learned. So that was one thing, and then the other thing that was like short on time was the couch. The couch was the item that took the longest to get there. So that came like the day I was leaving, so I just had enough time. But I would say that's something you have to like definitely order like say at least a week or two in advance to make sure it has like ample time to get there because obviously the bigger the furniture is, the longer it will take to come from Amazon. But everything else came pretty much in time. 10 days was more than enough when you had someone helping you actually. So yeah, that was definitely a learning process, but it was kind of fun too because you get to like figure out the color scheme and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, on my first interview that I have done, I interviewed Sage from Minon. They actually have the company about the furniture and everything else. They can do it in one place. You
That's
can choose
awesome.
different companies as well. Yeah. So when you were thinking about furnishing the place, question number one is, did you have anybody in mind? Like it's going to be, travel nurse or families, and then according to that, you purchase the furniture. And question number two is, how did you know what furniture to buy? Did you have a list that you follow along for each room?
Yeah, so as far as like the first part of the question with like who I was going after,
Hmm.
I will say like since I've had the furnished rental, I've had a huge like variety of people there. So there isn't a lot of consistency. I've had like people who are buying a new house or going through a divorce or they're part of like a minor league baseball team. So it's very diverse.
Hmm.
But I have had a couple people who are like traveling nurses or traveling medical professionals. And so for that reason, I did get like blackout curtains, and then I got like a white noise sound machine. That way they could hopefully like sleep if they had like weird shifts, things like that. So I got those two items. But then yeah, I also had a list of like furniture to buy. I actually found one through the BiggerPockets forums. I just kind of was researching what other people have done when they've been furnishing a rental out of state or just furnishing, an Airbnb in general. And a lot of people had like helpful lists. So I kind of grabbed one of those.
Hmm.
I found one that was for a two bed, one bath, which was the unit size. And that gave me a pretty good like starting point. And then from there, I created a spreadsheet. So I copied and pasted the items and then I created a spreadsheet with the price and a link to the specific item I bought. So that way, if I ever want to like furnish another one of the units, I already have a whole list of all the links I need to buy, which will make the process much easier. So I think that was good to kind of like save everything in one spot and just, I can send that to someone in the future and be like, this is exactly what I bought to replicate it.
Sounds like you're starting to create SOPs, standard operation procedures for the next property.
And
Very
people
smart.
told me that, like multiple people were like, record everything you're doing. That way you're gonna save a lot of time later on. I was like, that's good advice.
It's absolutely wow. Okay, so you did the furnishing. You had some hiccups throughout the process, but you overcame them. And then let's talk about systems, right? What kind of systems did you implement in your business?
Yeah, so there's definitely a variety depending on like what I'm looking at that point. So one thing that I've done is like the income and expenses tracking is something that I've tried to like automate more. So I have like a weekly like 30 I think it's 30 minutes right now, like calendar event for myself every week on Tuesday mornings. I'll basically record all of the expenses and income for that week in a spreadsheet that I made. And in 2025 I actually found a bookkeeper who will be recording it for me, which is great. So I'm writing out and putting together a list of all of like the places he can find pictures of like bank statements and like credit card statements, and I'll just be uploading that to the folder every week, and then he can just go in and record all of it for me. So I think that's going to be very helpful. Up until the end of this month, I'll be doing it myself. So I'm excited for that part of it. And then as far as like maintenance stuff, I have a spreadsheet that I actually made with my first and second choices for all of the different trades. So I have ones for plumbers, electricians, handyman, all that kind of stuff. And so anytime a tenant has an issue, I can quickly go to that sheet and then see like who's available out of like those two options. I have their phone number and contact info. And then I also have a troubleshooting guide for maintenance stuff. So before I ever want to call like a tradesperson or the handyman, I'll also have like the tenant try things. Like, for example, there was like the classic thing where the outlet isn't working, and then I didn't know there was a GFI like button, and so I had an electrician come out because I couldn't figure it out, and I had them turn on and off the breaker because that's one thing
Hmm.
you always want to try.
Hmm.
But the like electrician came out and they were like, "Oh, you just have to press the GFI button," and they didn't know. So things like that. It's like, okay, make sure they always do that kind of thing before you like have them call someone out there. And then also like I for the like screening process for like tenants, I have like a standard lease agreement, a standard application, standard set of questions that I send them. So all that kind of stuff is all like in different documents. And then I've been able to make everything much more organized with all of these documents and questionnaires and forms. Because there's actually a lot of different forms you have to have when you're like going through like the tenant turnover process. And so I had them all stored on a new Google Drive. I think it was much easier to organize everything when I create a separate email, like Gmail account, Google Drive, and like folders for everything that was just for real estate. So I only did that about 3 months ago, but that's been super nice. Instead of like commingling all of my documents for like my work or just personal stuff,
Mhm,
it's
mhm.
all on like a separate drive now, and it makes everything much more easy to find. And I feel way more like, um, less stressed, just going to the drive. So I've been really helpful, or really been, it's been easier to handle everything that way for sure.
Understood. Um, y- I interview Larissa from Baselane,
Mhm.
which is which program gives you three options, in my opinion. It does the banking for you, it does the bookkeeping for you,
Oh, nice.
and then something else I don't remember right now. But you might want to look at this one as well, a Baselane.
I'll keep that in mind. I haven't heard of that, but that sounds super helpful.
Yeah, and I think it also does something with the tenants. I don't remember, but you can watch one of the recordings on my Facebook page here. Let's go back to Facebook because this is, after all, midterm rentals. And I would like to also ask you the following. How did you find the tenant for the midterm rental? And then what was the condition there? 2 months, 3 months? Did you get through Furnish Finder or did you get it through Airbnb? Can you give some details about that process?
Yeah, so the first person I found, they were from Airbnb, and they were staying originally for 1 month, and then they were here on like a work contract kind of thing. So it was just, I think he was in the construction industry, if
Mhm.
I remember correctly. He was going to stay for 1 month for a job, and then it got extended towards like that last week. And so I was able to help him extend for 1 more week. So that was a 2 month long process, or 2 month long stay for him. And that was pretty easy. Like I said, I just kind of make sure their identity is verified on Airbnb, and then I have them go in. If they're staying for 3 months or longer, I'll have them sign a lease. Or if they're from Furnish Finder, I have them sign a month to month lease. So I have had one person on Furnish Finder, not too many. Most of them are Airbnb, but one person who was on Furnish Finder, and I just put together a medium term lease. Very simple. It was just copy and pasting the long term, and then I went through and edited stuff like, for example, they don't pay for utilities, so you can remove that. You adjust like the monthly rental amount. And then that was just something to give me peace of mind, because Airbnb has like that air cover. So it's kind of like insurance for Airbnb guests, but Furnish Finder doesn't really offer that. So I like to have kind of an added peace of mind for that, just to
Mhm.
make sure there's some sort of like coverage in case something goes wrong with them.
I see. Speaking of utilities, for your midterm rentals, are you covering all the utilities?
Yeah, so I definitely factored that in when I was pricing it.
Mhm.
I also offer like Wi-Fi to them too, because I feel like now if you have an Airbnb and there's no Wi-Fi, they're gonna be, surprised. So yeah, I just cover that for them. I was also marketing it as like an additional option on Zillow for a while. So I was saying if it was on Zillow, it was marketed lower. It was, I think, 1,300 instead of
Mhm.
like 15, 1,600. And for that one, they would pay for utilities, because Zillow is more known for being like a long-term place for tenants. So that was also an option, but I didn't get any interest there since it is more
Mhm.
like for unfurnished units. But yeah, I would say if it was on Zillow, I'd probably have them also sign a lease and then pay for utilities on their own.
Okay. Do you have like a cap, like on utilities, like for the water, $200 or whatever it is? How do you
Yeah.
manage that?
So I haven't implemented that yet. That's probably a good idea. There hasn't been any months where it's like been crazy more than other times.
Mhm.
So I haven't really had that issue, but probably a good idea like to enlist something like that. I would probably just have to make sure Airbnb is okay with it, but I'm sure they don't really mind.
Okay, got it. Um, what about garbage or snow removal? Who does this?
Yeah, so it was actually a process with garbage. I didn't realize this, but the year before I bought my quad, the city of Oklahoma City decided that quads were considered non-residential in their eyes, and so
Interesting.
basically the city stopped funding garbage like pickup for Oklahoma City like quads. And I only realized this about like 3 months after I bought it. Apparently, the previous owner of the property was just paying for the garbage pickup and they didn't realize it, and then their contract with whoever was doing it ended in March, and I bought it in January. And so one day the garbage, it was waste management, they went and
Mhm.
just picked up all the all the bins, and then my tenants were like, "Oh, we have no place to throw out trash. Like, what happened?" And I was like, "I don't know." So I was like calling the city, and I realized, oh, they don't service quads. And then I was trying to figure out like what was going on. And then eventually my tenant saw someone from waste management picking up the bins for the quad next to me too. And so she talked to him and asked like, "What's like, do you know why, like
No resolution,
what's
yeah.
going on?"
Yeah.
And he was like, "Yeah, I was ordered to pick this up." So then I was able to figure out that my property actually had a contract with waste management. So the city wasn't doing it, but waste management still was. So I called them and I asked if I can re-enlist like my garbage service, and they actually said it would be like $400 a month at first, and they were like, "Yeah, that seems like crazy unreasonable. Like it definitely shouldn't be this high. I'm not sure why." And I was like, "Is there any way to like lower that?" And I just basically asking that helped me a lot because they were like, "Honestly, I'm gonna see what I can do because that does seem like an outrageous price compared to like the other single families and duplexes in the area." So after like a couple of weeks of like them talking to other people in waste management, I was able to get a contract for like $75 a month for the 4 bins. So each unit has their own bin now that they put out every week. That way, it's just like everyone's responsible for their own bin, and then I add that to each lease as like an amendment. So basically, it's like $25 a month for each unit to just like take care
Mm.
of their own bin, and that way I wasn't paying for trash either. But yeah, that was a learning process because I didn't know that would be something to deal with. And in that 2 or 3 week time period where I was trying to figure out like the garbage situation, I actually had to like rent like this big like rental dumpster, so that they had some place to put their trash out. So now I know like if I buy a quad again, that kind of thing, it's like hard to know those things in advance. But definitely something to, plan for in the future. But with the medium term, they do also have their own bin, and so basically, I just put like in the like listing agreement, like this is where the garbage goes, and then this is like the garbage day. If you can just take your bin out to like the street on that day on Tuesday, then that would be great, kind of thing. But that's pretty much it.
Wow, fascinating story. Never
Yeah,
heard it. And
I know it's crazy.
oh my God, how stressful it was to find somebody. Oh, wow, I can
I
just
know, right?
imagine.
Yeah, it
But
was surprising,
amazing. You went from $400 to $75. And
right?
one of the monthly meetup that we have for Cash Flow 101, I host with my co-host Michael. He actually teaches you need to ask something 6 times in order to get to where you want. It sounds like you did that automatically. $400. No, who can I ask next? Who can I ask next? And finally, $75. Okay. What about the snow removal, for example, or lawn cutting? Cutting.
Yeah, so that was another thing that I didn't account for at first because it's my first property, so I'm learning all these things. And when I bought the property, it was in winter, so there was definitely like snow going on and all that, but there's not really a driveway, so I haven't had to worry about like snow plowing or
Mm.
any of that. There is a parking lot in the back of the unit, but it's basically just paved asphalt like the road, so I haven't really had to do anything there. But I will say, like in the spring, it can get really rainy and really green.
Mm.
And so I didn't, since I'm out of state, I didn't notice this, and I will definitely know now in the future. But the grass was growing pretty high. So then my tenant, one of them texted me one day, and they were like, well, messaged me through like the Rent Ready app, and they were like, the grass is getting pretty high. Like, do you have like a gardener person or anything? And I was like, I haven't really thought about that. And so
Mm.
I had someone who had a reference, and he just mows the front and backyard every 2 weeks for like $40. And it's like a pretty good sized front yard, a small-ish backyard area. And he just came like clockwork. So that was one of the things that was like super easy because he just came without me having to remind him. And he only did it from, I think it was like May or April timeframe until like October, and then it becomes cold season. So he's only doing that for about half of the year. The other half is pretty cold. But yeah, that was something that I learned over time. Definitely, want to have someone just come out there without you having to remind them, and then I'm able to pay him like through Venmo every 2 weeks, so it's easy to record and just remember that way.
Got it. Okay. I mean, I'm not going to ask you about termites and pest control. Maybe something to think about. You still did not figure out this, probably.
I mean, as far as like, I haven't really had any issues with that yet, but that is something I should probably. I know I had a pest control guy inspect the property before I
Hmm.
bought it,
Hmm.
to make sure there was no like wood damage or like pest issues then. So I know it was like bought pretty well, but probably a good thing to like get that just inspection every year or so to make sure there's no new issues popping up.
Okay, understood. Couple more questions about midterm rentals here. So you're listing on Airbnb Furnish Finder. You're using a Rent Ready app to do the screening. What about the keyless entry? Uh, what brand do you have there, and what other application are you using in your business? If you don't mind sharing, please.
Yeah, so I use the Slage app for locks.
Mhm.
So that's a pretty easy one. I just had those all installed for the front door and then the two units that were unoccupied at the time when I bought it. And so they have those like keyless, pin codes that you
Mhm.
enter in, and they're super nice because you can go like I can go on my phone at any time and add or delete like any pin codes, and so I can, it's very easy to manage like out of state. And then I also have a lockbox in the front of the door in case like there's ever a malfunction. You want to make sure you have like physical keys available if needed. And I use Blink for like my security camera. So I just have like two. One's pointing at like the front area right inside the front door where you can see the entrances to two of the units, and then one's pointing outside. So that's been helpful just in case like anyone has any questions. I don't think I've ever actually had to like use it for anything bad, but it's good to like have that peace of mind. And then, yeah, Rent Ready is the thing I probably use the most. It makes rent collection super easy. I just set rent reminders for everyone, like, you know, 2 days before, 3 days before rent is due, and then like I have a 5 day grace period. So if they
Mhm.
pay between the first and the fifth, that's totally fine. So I have like those reminders set up, and I store all of my lease agreements, all of the documents that they send me from like their employers, and all of that is all stored on Rent Ready as well. And then that will also create a end of the year kind of like ledger for you. So you can see all of the income and expenses for like a specific unit or even a specific like person, like tenant, at the end of the year too, which is nice.
Okay, so your Airbnb is connected to Rent Ready to do the communication with the tenants as well.
No, so that's just for long term. Yeah,
Long term.
Airbnb is the one that I'd probably just it's a little bit hard because I think that the bookkeeper will be helpful for this part of it because Airbnb will show you like the income you've gotten for a unit in 1 year with medium term rent tenants, but it's not as like comprehensive because you do have tenants coming from multiple like apps and everything. So that's a little bit different. It takes a little bit more time to like combine everything.
Okay, got it. Okay, so in addition to Airbnb, do you use any other software to communicate with the guests?
Yeah, honestly, I've been mostly doing it just Airbnb. They do have those automated messages, so I use that for like when they first book a place, when they're about to like move in, like the day before, and then I have, or it's actually the morning of. It sends them like the house guide and everything with
Mhm,
like
mhm.
entry info, and then the day before they leave as well. So I have like those automated ones set up. Besides that, it's pretty much just on the app.
And,
If they have any questions.
so no other PMS programs like Guestly or Hostfully or Honores, nothing like that.
Not yet, just because it's one unit. I do think that it's gonna be something I would wanna implement the more, like, medium terms or short terms I get, though.
I understand. Okay, what do you do? Like you said, this first tenant originally booked for 1 month, but then he wanted to extend it for another month to get all together, right? What happened if somebody would book your property at that time?
Yeah,
Did
so I definitely work on, like, a first come, first served basis, so
Mhm.
if someone had booked it, let's say he was checking out on, like, February 1st, if
Mhm.
someone had booked the unit on February 1st to move in, like, later that evening, I would honor that and go with, like, letting them stay, but
Okay.
luckily, he told me about a week in advance, and no one had booked it at that point for that time, so it worked out well, and he was able to just extend. It's been kind of like that, I would say, most of the time. People will book for, like, a month or 2, like, within a week of moving in. So it's not as in advance as I would have expected when I first got the property. So that's kind of good to know. At first, it was stressing me out, like, no one's booked for the next month. But then you realize, like, people tend to book last minute more than I expected for sure.
Understood. So I was just wondering if you're blocking the days just in case if they're gonna extend, but you don't do anything special. First come, first serve. We have
Yeah,
a.
pretty much.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I don't let the calendar show anything past like 3 months in advance or so, just because I don't want someone booking like, 3 months in advance, and then there's like an awkward like 2 month gap where like you're not sure if that's gonna be fully filled. So I try and like keep it like, short-ish time frame out. They can't like book a year in advance or anything. And I also have like a pre-approval like setting on, so I have to actually approve the stay. I don't just let anyone come for the month. That way I can
Ah.
just make sure they're like not, because I've had people before like request to stay for a month or two, but they had like a 1-star rating on their previous hosts and
Mm.
stuff. And so I was like, I'm just gonna stay away from that, just
Yeah,
like be safe. So I was
24
really
hours it will
nice that
expire and that's it. Okay, got
yeah.
it. We have a comment from James who says, "Thank you so much for the valuable insights." So
Oh, yeah, of course.
I appreciate. Let's move on. Next question: cleaning, the most important part, I think, in this business. How do you handle that?
Yeah, so I have a phenomenal cleaner. Like she is awesome. Basically, she's attached to my Airbnb account, so she can see when the guest checks out, basically.
Mm.
And that's really nice because I don't really have to check in. She just like is able to log in as a co-host, and then she can see when a turnover is happening. And if you have a cleaner that's very dependable like that, it's really nice because you don't have to, communicate, oh, this guest is checking out at this time and all that kind of thing. And she has a team of people. It's like 2 or 3 other cleaners will like come in and help her. So that's been great. If there's ever like, for example, when the doors like were low on batteries, she can replace the doors. She'll get like the supplies to replenish like paper towels, toilet paper, all that stuff, and she'll just add that to like the monthly or the whatever cleaning it is,
Mhm.
that just like cleaning check. And so it makes things super nice. Same for if like one time there was a sheet with like a Sharpie stain on it. She has told me that, and I was able to tell the tenant and then had them reimburse me for like that sheet that I had to buy. So things like that, it's very nice to have someone that will point out those like little things that could go unnoticed if they're not super thorough. So yeah, I would say she's like on the pricier side. It's like 130 usually to clean at each time compared to another girl I found that was 90. But the other girl I could tell was not as thorough.
Mhm.
So I just went with the one that was a little bit more expensive, and I think it's worth it with like all the extra stuff she can do if I
And
need it.
and how did you find this cleaning lady?
It was a referral from the real estate agent I used.
Or is still okay? From wow, amazing story. I think they are the most important part of your business to keep them happy for sure.
Yeah, I didn't realize like how valuable they can be for like a medium term unit like that.
They're basically your boots on the ground for sure.
Literally. Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Um, we have 10 minutes left. It's been almost a year since you're managing. What your thought before you bought or before you pulled the trigger, all the scarcity mindset, if you had all the doubts, and then a year later, what what do you wish you knew or did differently? Can
Yeah,
you
I would say like
reflect?
I was definitely, like, kinda scared when I was, like, signing the papers for the first time. I was like, "This is crazy, what am I doing?"
Mhm.
It was really nice having that, like, group of people that I met at those meetups, throughout the year before that. They made me feel much more, like, secure about it because I asked at least, like, 3 people to also analyze the deal before I went in for it, and I was making sure, like, they had experienced the exact same thing. So it was definitely nice having that group of people around me to kind of, like, support me through it. And then I would say as far as, like, learning lessons, I think that, I feel like it was hard about 6 months after I bought it. I realized I haven't been doing a great job of recording the income and expenses very well. So that was something I would definitely, like, go back and be more diligent about the beginning. I
Mhm.
learned later on, like, I mean, I had heard it on podcasts, like, many times, but I just didn't take it very, like, literally. I was like, "Oh, yes, I will do that," and then I pushed it off, and then by the time it was, like, June or July, I was like, "Okay, I should be more thorough about this." So that's when I went in and made all the, tracking for all of those things. Because, like I said, I had recorded all of the furnishing, and I
Mhm.
had all of those costs, but besides that, I hadn't really been doing the monthly stuff, and so that was one thing that, I found later on is gonna be super helpful probably when I'm filing taxes. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, and then another thing that I learned, one of the tenants I texted when I introduced myself to them instead of messaging them on like the Rent Ready app. I didn't really think about it. I was like, oh, I'll just like introduce myself over the phone call, and they had my personal phone number. And then I later read a book by Brandon Turner. It was like the book on managing rental properties,
Mhm.
and they were like, have them communicate through the app. They shouldn't just have access to your cell phone number like
Yeah.
anytime. And so I learned with the other tenants, none of them have them, but that one tenant does. Luckily, she's great. She's messaged me like maybe 2 times since I've had her, but that's something,
Yeah.
I
two
got lucky with that one. Yeah.
Absolutely. Two comments there. Number one, for my, again, check best lane that for what I was talking about. It will help you a lot. For my expenses, I have an app called Expensify.
Oh, I've
They
heard
are,
of that one.
yeah, they're free. All I do, I
Okay.
create like a report for each property, and then if
Hmm.
I have expense, I take a screenshot, I take a picture of the receipt, populate, and right there on the spot, good to go. When the
Easy.
end year comes, I have report for each property, export out as a CSV, give it to my CPA. Hasta la vista, baby. So
No.
the other comment I would like to tell you also about the phone number, right? Google Voice, this is the best way to go. You
Oh,
can
that's a good idea.
install, yeah, and then when you call them, or I mean, they have, I think it's coming with, it's a different number all the time, but they can text you. You can text them if you want, like, from Google Voice, and this is what I use for my tenants as well, for Google Voice.
That's a good idea because I'm like, that's an easier way for them to like message me without it just like,
Y-
tied to
Yeah,
you and yeah, your phone.
exactly. Yeah, and
Nice.
unless you want to go through a rent ready, then definitely yes, just to capture everything there. All right. Any books, podcasts, creators you recommend
Yeah,
for
totally.
everybody else? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say, like I said, Rich Dad Poor Dad was like the turning point for me. But then after that, when I was first like pretty soon after I read those ones, I read the book on managing rental properties. That was huge, and then house hacking strategy. Even though I didn't do a house hack, that gives you a lot of like foundational like information about like screening tenants and all that kind of stuff, finding a property, analyzing it. So those were two books that really like helped me at the beginning of my investing journey.
Hmm.
And then I would say like for like videos and podcasts, BiggerPockets is like my favorite. That one's like super comprehensive. When I was first getting introduced to real estate, I didn't know too much about it. And so I was listening to and a little bit overwhelmed. And so I listened to the Rookie podcast for a while
Hmm.
first, and that gave me a lot of foundation. I would say after a year or so, I only listen to BiggerPockets now, but the Rookie one is really helpful if you're just getting started. It's very much like people who might even have just like two or three deals, but they share all like their lessons and all that
Understood.
too. So I found that really helpful.
Yeah, I will add one more podcast that changed my life as well. It's called Get Rich Education by Keith.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he does a great job also educating. In 1 minute, can you please talk about what you're doing on your day-to-day
Yeah.
lender, right? And then the other minute, can you talk about your future plans?
Yeah, so I am a hard money lender for my day job. So we lend fix and flip loans, ground up construction, and DSCR loans for investors nationwide. So definitely reach out to me if you have any questions. I'll like give you my Instagram. It's closing.for.cashflow. That's probably the easiest way to message me. But yeah, it's pretty competitive rates for investors, and we do all kinds of loans nationwide. So that's like my day job. And then for future like plans, I'm hoping to do a flip and a burr next year. So hoping to do them either in Cleveland, Ohio, or Oklahoma City, where I have the property right now. So yeah, just working on trying to find hopefully some sort of boots on the ground to help me through that process because there'll be a renovation process out of state. So yeah, starting to look at deals in those markets and figure out try and finding one that works with the numbers in my buy box.
Beautiful. I can connect you with somebody from Cleveland, Ohio. I think I have somebody.
Awesome.
Um, Boots on the ground, like you want. And anything else you want to say before we conclude here?
I don't think so, but thanks again so much for having me on.
Absolutely.
It
My
was
pleasure.
awesome, like sharing my story, and thanks again.
See you next meetup. Thank you, Mary. Appreciate it. Have a great weekend and happy holidays.
Yeah, happy holidays, you too.